Perfect. And then without further ado, I will hand over to Suzanne. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So good afternoon, everyone. As Sarah says, I'm one of the admissions tutors, but I'm actually primarily a consultant geriatrician at the University Hospitals of Leicester. In fact, I've just rushed in off the ward, so apologies if you can see the top of my scrubs, and if I get a bit dry in the mouth, it's because I'm gasping for a cup of tea. I'm going to whiz you through some advice for interviews for medicine, but also for other healthcare courses. So all healthcare courses have to interview. It's part of the requirements by all our regulatory bodies. So we're just going to talk through what your students could expect over the next year if they go ahead with applying, talk about some different interview formats and how you might try and advise and support them in this process. So in the UK, I don't think there are any medicine courses that don't interview because, as I say, we have to as part of the GMC, and most around the world will also interview as well. Within the UK, it's because the NHS dictates that, dictates is a bit of a harsh word, but anyway, they dictate that we have to practice values-based recruitment. So if nothing else you take from this, it's advise your students to read around what values-based recruitment means, and it's about the values of the NHS, not their values per se. And we can't assess that from their academic capabilities, nor can we really assess it from their UCAS form or personal statement. So we have to assess it at interview. And we also want to see how they've developed those values, you know, what experience they've had that shows that they can demonstrate these. And that's really why we're doing interviews. It has to be said that particularly for medicine, the vast number of applicants are perfectly appointable, but we have far more applicants than we do places. And so the interview is another way of trying to rank people. And in healthcare professions other than medicine, there is still competition, and the interview will help sort of rank people after. So what can students expect for 22 and beyond? So from the Medical School Council, I know that at the moment there's about 10 of us who are planning online interviews only. At the moment, some haven't made decisions, and then some are going to give the students a choice. We decided not to give a choice because we didn't want to, we want to make sure all the students get the same experience, and we're not entirely sure that it is the same, some online, some face-to-face. So in terms of invites to interview, the biggest tip is make sure they check their junk email regularly. We've had massive issues about 3 years ago where about half of our interview requests just disappeared into the ether, went to their spam email. And as you probably know, if you don't check your spam regularly, it's all deleted after a short period of time. So please make sure they check their junk and spam, and please make sure that they, as soon as they get an email from the university, they make sure that that's you know, an email that should go into their inbox. I forgot there's a technical word for that, isn't there? But I'm not technically minded. So in terms of interviews, for medical schools, most will be now running multiple mini interviews. Some people who are still doing online are running panel. For the other allied health professions, again, there's a mixture. Some will be multiple mini interviews, some will be panel. Some will have some group work, and some will have literacy and numeracy tests. So for instance, our nursing degree has a very formal numeracy test as part of their selection. Now, again, the information about what they can expect will be in the emails that they're sent. So again, just again, make sure they see their emails, make sure they read them, and that they understand what to expect. Different courses will put different amounts of information on the internet, on their web pages as well, but often that's not as detailed as they'll get in the emails. So in terms of medical school interview timeline, as most of you probably know, that medicine, dentistry and veterinary schools have an earlier deadline with UCAS, and that's the 15th of October. So for 2023 entry, it'll be the 15th of October 22. We then get all of our applications. So this year we had 3,000 plus applications. We have to rank them. We then decide who's getting an interview. We interview between December and February. And after that, we will then start to make offers. Now, the other bit in terms of supporting students with medical school applications is because of the constraints on numbers, we're a capped course. Because some candidates will get one offer, some will get two, some will get three, some will get four. When the offers are made and that UCAS deadline in terms of when they have to make their decision, until everybody's made their decisions, we don't know whether we're going to have enough places filled or not. So we end up making more offers over a very long period of time. And in fact, we've just had the first UCAS deadline. We probably will still be making offers because of this, waiting for people to decide whether they're going to put us firm or insurance or decline us. And that's where medicine's particularly painful for the applicant, and we acknowledge that it's actually really painful for us, but it's very painful for the applicant. So it's trying to support them that that's normal because of this strict cap that we're under. So for other healthcare courses, the UCAS deadline is usually the 15th of January. So they'll process the applications in the January, February, interview February to March, and then start to make offers. And again, students then decide what's going to be their firm or insurance choice. Some of the healthcare courses will go into clearing. Medicine usually tries not to, but that does differ depending on the medical school. And also the last few years with COVID has completely changed what's normal. So we're all a bit unsure as to how it's going to change things going forward. So in terms of multiple mini interviews, every university is a little bit different, but a multiple interview, there has to be at least 5 stations between 6 and 10. Some places the stations are short as 5 minutes, some is as long as 10 minutes. We run ours as 8 minutes. Each station will be different, and each station's trying to look at a different part of these values and aptitudes that we can't test in their UCAS form or from their academic results. So for instance, they might need to just give an answer to a question. They might need to take part in a role play because communication is so important. Most healthcare courses will have an actor or a patient or an experience simulator to role play. They might need to discuss an ethical scenario. Now, this will differ. Some universities always do this, some don't. My personal feeling is that, I'm not expecting them to come in and know everything about ethics. That's part of the medical school training, but they will need to have some understanding of common ethical principles. They might need to do a maths question. They might need to ask more standard questions such as why medicine, why nursing, why physiotherapy, or why physiotherapy, not the other healthcare professions. So some questions they might be able to prepare answers for, others they're going to need to think on their feet. And the most important thing is to actually read the question they're being asked and not give the answer they think that we're after, because again, it comes back to this thing that, we don't expect them to know everything because we're going to teach them quite a lot on the medical course. So panel interviews, it's more traditional, it's like a job interview, and they're usually 2 to 4 people. They might be other students, they might be healthcare professionals, they might be faculty members. Increasingly, they might be service users. So I know on our nursing courses, they have people from our patient and carer group interview. A panel interview usually lasts about 20 minutes. And again, they're more focused, typical questions. So it might be, what's your strength, what's your weakness, why do you want to do the course that you want, tell me when you can show that you've demonstrated X, Y, Z etc. So there's not usually the role play element, or watching a video or reading an article, that sort of thing, in a panel interview. So in terms of what students can do to prepare, I would say don't go on a course. I think courses teach you what they think you need to answer, and all of us are trying to get you to answer the questions we're asking you, not questions that a course has taught. But things that they can do is make sure they're listening to the news, listen to Today programme in the morning, listen to the 6 o'clock news, look at the news headlines, look at the BBC website, the healthcare pages, get an idea of what is topical, what's going on in the moment. Not surprisingly, over the last couple of years, we've had questions dealing with the pandemic, and not, again, necessarily about the individuals, to the delivery of healthcare, rather than, expecting them to know how it affects people. They should read up a little bit about medical ethics, because I say some schools will ask them some basics around that, but they're not expected to know everything. And probably a top tip is, don't get them to quote Jehovah's Witnesses, because everybody who's a clinician, as soon as they go Jehovah's Witnesses, we all roll our eyes, because we can count on one hand that's been an issue in our clinical. I've been a clinician for over 35 years. I can count on one hand the number of times that's been an issue. So it's about trying to make things more real. They might practice some common questions. Why do they want to do medicine? Why do they want to do nursing? Why choose that over the other? They need to think about their math skills, numeracy skills. So we have a minimum GCSE requirement, because prescribing, certainly for nursing, midwifery, medicine, is so important that there will be a need to do some numeracy element. And the thing that the interview is really looking at is about their ability to reflect. So all healthcare professionals need to reflect. Healthcare professionals that can't reflect, that don't have insight into their practice, they're the ones that struggle. So they need to get into that habit about reflecting now. And they need to be able to reflect about what they've learned and how that can be useful in the career that they're going forward into. So I often use the analogy that for somebody who's held a job down in McDonald's, I don't know why I always pick McDonald's, I never eat at McDonald's, but that held a job in McDonald's, they have worked with a team. They have turned up regularly to do their shifts. They have balanced that work with their schoolwork. They have dealt with stroppy people either as customers or other members of the team. Those are all really important life skills that they can transfer into their professional work going forward. So again, it's about that reflection. Our students' top tips are to make sure you arrive in plenty of time. So if you've got a face-to-face interview, don't turn up 5 minutes before. Make sure you arrive a good half an hour before. You can always have a wander around the campus. You can always find somewhere to have a cup of coffee. Make sure that you read up about that university, because there may be questions about others. The courses are all a little bit different. Obviously, they'll have done some research before they apply. So, for instance, they're not going to apply to Leicester if they want to go to a problem-based learning course, those sorts of things. A lot of courses will look at the personal statement. So places will actually with the interviewers. So make sure that they've read that beforehand. But make sure they try and enjoy it. Nobody who's interviewing is trying to trip up applicants at this stage. We are trying to get the best out of them and give them the chance to shine. We know they're all nervous. If it's an online interview, they need to remember that it is still a formal interview. So I don't know whether it's just a reflection that I am getting very old, but one of the things that does irritate me is when people email in asking questions as if they're texting their mates. So it's, hi, can you tell me about, with no name, no nothing. And even when you've replied to them with your name, they still reply back, hi. So, it's a formal interview that they're coming to. So please ask them to dress smartly. So, that can be school uniform. They don't have to go out and buy new suit. It can even be a smart open neck shirt. It doesn't have to be you know, anything new, but they just need to remember that this is a formal interview. They need to have a quiet space. And we certainly have had a number of students who've had interviews done in their schools or their colleges rather than at home because it's been difficult for them to get a quiet space, and that's absolutely fine. It's about being able to get a device in that quiet space. We suggest that they practice with their technology in advance so that they're familiar. I can't say for every medical school, but certainly we arrange practice sessions with some of our current students in the weeks before the interview so that they can log on, they can see what the platform we use looks like, they can be moved around by the students so they get a feeling of how that's going to work on the day, and as well as being able to ask the students some questions. In terms of support that you could offer in addition to just advice is, you know, you could run some practice interviews. Students could practice asking each other questions. There are on the web, if you just put in common medical interviews or nurse interviews or physiotherapy interviews, whatever, you'll get a list of questions. And it's part of it is just getting used to answering questions just like that. And there is a website run by the Medical Schools Council about how to run a mock MMI, and Sarah's recording the talk, but also can send out that link to anybody who's interested. So common mistakes. In the UK, male candidates don't tend to perform as well at interview. And these are candidates from school, so the candidates that you're dealing with. And we feel that's an emotional development issue. We don't know how to get around it. We are constantly trying to review everything every year, but that's something to try and perhaps support the boys about practicing some of these things like compassion and empathy in their answers. So that's a common error. Not error, that's the wrong thing to do. A common problem, but it's not helped by the fact that most of the applicants are female, so it all sort of knocks on effect as well. The main mistake I see is this, as I've said before, is students not answering the question they're being asked. So trying to get in something that they think we want to hear about, but that's not what we've asked them. So answer the question that they're being asked. And then the other thing is sometimes we get very, very brief answers, and then others we get students who talk and talk and talk and aren't very focused. And so again, it's about thinking about what's the length of the station. So if you've been told it's an 8-minute station and the examiner at the beginning says, I've got 4 questions to ask you in the next 8 minutes, then they should be thinking that each answer's got to take about 90 seconds, rather than spending 8 minutes answering the first question, because the interview will try and chip in and move them on, but they also need to remember that they can always go back to a question at the end. There are some techniques that might help. So the STAR mnemonics one that some people find helpful. And again, in practicing questions with them, that's something that you might be able to do. So that's all I've got to say. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Sarah can facilitate any questions that you might have.